seated. Shabbat Shalom. Great to be here this morning with all of you. When Rabbi Newman came and mentioned to me that she'd be away on June 22nd, I jumped at the opportunity to share with you a few words of Torah in honor of Pride Month. So as many of you know already, I am queer and a part of the LGBTQ plus community. My partner, Jen, and I just got engaged. Very exciting. And we are grateful to be a part of this community at Am Yisrael that has been so welcoming and so warm to us. Pride Month started after the Stonewall riots in New York City for gay liberation in 1969. It would behoove me if I did not acknowledge all of the LGBTQ plus folks who came before me and paved the way for me and my kind of love. This was not always the case, and I am grateful to those who fought for a better world. There is, of course, so much work to do and change that needs to be made in regards to transgender rights and more, but I will hold off on that for now. When I think about Pride, I don't just think of rainbows and brightly colored decorations, though that is all very fun, and I was very close to wearing my rainbow skirt this morning, but I held back. But I think about the need to celebrate who I am. I know that many of you are closely connected to family and dear friends that identify as LGBTQ+, and I pray that we can always be ourselves in this world and in our communities. As we turn to the Parsha this week, B'Halotcha, which happens to be my bat mitzvah anniversary, I am reminded of the uniqueness of our language and the symbolism that our Torah holds. I'd like to open up our Chumashim, feel free to take them out, and turn to page 826. We're going to look at verses 35 and 36. So page 826, I read Chumashim. You a second to take it out. So verse 35, Vayhi bin soah ha'aron vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanusu mesanecha mipanecha. 36, Uvnucho yomar shuva Adonai rivavot alfei Yisrael. When the ark was to set out, Moses would say, "Advance, O Lord, may your enemies be scattered and may your foes flee before you." And when it halted, God would say, "Return, O Lord, you who are Israel's myriads of thousands." So how do we know verses 35 and 36? We just sang verse 35. Where did we sing verse 35? Taking out the Torah, correct. And what about verse 36? Does it sound familiar? Returning the Torah, yes, exactly. So we use that verse at the end. You might hear Cantor, Simon, and I say, Uvnucho yomar, when we get to the end as we put the Torah back into the ark. So you might notice, it's kind of hard to tell in the Chumash, but you can see them, they are there, that there are these two verses are bracketed by backwards and upside down nuns. So you see that there's a letter nun right above verse 35 and then next to the end of verse 36. It's very clear in the scroll where these are. So anyone who has an aliyah this morning, take a peek and see if you can see those inverted nuns. And for those of you who don't have an aliyah this morning, when it's lifted, maybe put your goggles on and see if you can see it. It's very clear where these are, where these inverted nuns are. And I've had many people ask me, why are those there? Thank you. Why are those there? Yes. So of course, I did a little bit of a deep dive into figuring out why these backwards nuns are present around these two verses. So I learned that they're called a nun hafucha, literally a flipped nun. So in my research, some say that the verse is marked in this way because it's in the wrong place. The nuns are meant to indicate that the verse should be placed elsewhere in the text in future rewrites. Interesting. Very interesting. Others say that the symbols function as bookends, that these two verses should stand alone as an entire book of Torah. This is the most common interpretation. And can you imagine just two verses as a whole book? Just these two verses as a whole book. This would mean that these verses, which are right in the middle of the book of Numbers, would split Numbers into 3 books. So you have the first half of Numbers, these 2 verses in the middle, and then the last half of Numbers, which would make a total of how many books? 7 books of the Torah, right? 7 books of the Torah, instead of 5, which 7 is a pretty popular number in Jewish tradition, so it kind of makes sense. So this is a really unique idea from our rabbis, and so it's because of these backwards and upside down nuns that we don't see them anywhere else in the Torah. We do, I spoke about this with some of my colleagues earlier this week, and we do see it in a psalm. So Psalm 107 does include these backward nuns. I'm not going to go into that now, but if you're interested, we can take a look at a later point. So now you can really tell that these flipped nuns are special. They are unique. They symbolize something we may not be able to understand, but they are there and they are important. These verses need to be included and they need to stand out. Now, I want to tie it back to the queer community and Pride Month. Just like transgender people and queer people of varying gender identities and sexualities, we are all unique and need to be included. Today, we fight for equality for non-gender conforming people in our world and trans people in our lives. And these 2 verses, which we said, are recited at the beginning of the Torah service, when the ark is opened, and at the end of the service, the Torah service, when the ark is open to return our Sifrei Torah. So I want us to visualize for a moment the open ark at the beginning and the open ark at the end, that we should always have an open door, an open ark for all, and that we should remember that the Torah is open to all of us, that we should all be able to access Torah. We should all be able and invited to be held by the Torah, and it should be able to hold us. I love that these 2 verses symbolize that the Torah is open to us and all of us, no matter who we are. As a cisgender woman, I am privileged to stand here today to talk to you. I am not an expert on LGBTQ+ legislation or policy, but I am very passionate about inclusion. I am a member of the conservative movement's LGBTQ+ task force with members from the Rabbinical Assembly and the Cantor's Assembly, and we've created a toolkit for Pride Month and beyond, along with a guide for creating welcoming spaces, which we're hopeful will help conservative congregations in particular with their inclusion efforts. I look forward to continuing conversations with our community here about what it means to be a safe space for our queer community, especially as a part of the community myself. Please know that I am more than happy to be a resource for LGBTQ+ inclusion, and I'm excited to be a part of the Am Yisrael community and help infuse this kind of inclusion into our practices with the help of all of you. And you might be thinking, well, what can we do? What can we do now? So an example of this is how we call people up to the Torah, along with how we refer to our B'nai Mitzvah students and how we change our gender options or have options for those who are non-binary. And there are numerous resources and a lot of halachic resources out there as well, people who are rabbis and cantors who spent a lot of time putting together resources for exactly these things. And it's a way for us all to feel welcome and included and fully ourselves. Thank you so much for continuing to pave the way with me during this Pride Month. I'd love to open it up for any comments or questions or anything that you might want to share. Yeah, thank you. The microphone, yes, exactly, for our friends on live stream. Thank you. Okay, yes, Liz. Okay, the microphone in a second. Yeah, sorry, thank you. So for our friends on live stream, I know we're trying, yes, yeah, thank you.
How do we access the booklet that you're talking about with all of the information for names and genders and so on.
Yeah, wonderful. So I'm happy to talk to Nancy and have us send out a list of resources. So I noticed that not all of the language that we use around queer resources and issues and things like that are common to everyone. So I can send out kind of a document that has, some glossary of terms, like what does it mean to be a cisgender woman? I present myself as a woman, so that's what that means. But for some people don't know what that means or what non-binary means. Being genderqueer, what's the difference between that and non-binary? So I'm more than happy to send out those kind of resources. I will say I'll put a little plug in for Keshet, which is a wonderful organization that does LGBTQ plus inclusion in Jewish spaces in particular. Keshet means rainbow. So it's a really wonderful organization. And we have done a training with them, with Mr. Sherman and some of the teachers here. Our youth really benefit from as much knowledge as we can have for our teachers and for our community, especially. So thank you for that. I would be happy to send out some resources. And the Pride Toolkit that the group put together, yes, it includes some of those things too. Thank you, Liz.
So first, thank you for speaking to us this morning. I think there's some interesting parallels with Rabbi Newman Kamen's story in that she was one of the first generation of women to move through the conservative movement and be ordained. I haven't run the hard math, but I have to believe it's the case that when you started your professional training, the conservative movement was in a very different place than it is now in terms of welcoming people, in terms of gender and gender equality and same-sex relationships, etc. So my question is, what drew you to the conservative movement back then? How have you seen it change? And how much do you think it still has to go?
Thank you. I love that question. So I will say that I studied at Hebrew College in the Boston area, which is a non-denominational institution where I got my cantorial degree. And I decided to go there because I wanted to be able to move around and figure out what felt like the right fit for me, which was very important. So I was not raised in the conservative movement. So I grew up in a Reform congregation, and I did grow up with a rabbi who identified as queer, an assistant rabbi for a little period of time. So it was known to me that was comfortable and okay in a Reform congregation. What's interesting is I actually just this past week had a group meeting which is brand new for the Cantor's Assembly for LGBTQ plus affinity group. So Cantors who identify as queer coming together to connect. This is the first time ever that the Cantor's Assembly has had a group like this. So when you think about it, what now? It's 2024. There were people on that call who've been in the field over 20 years, and they have not had a space to be with their queer colleagues. It was really humbling for me to be able to provide that space. I was running the meeting. I was with a colleague of mine. Really a beautiful opportunity. I think that we are starting to make headway. I know that in terms of cisgender clergy, like men and women who are in queer relationships, who are in same-sex partnerships, that is much more accepted, I think, and understood for many than it is for those who might have be genderqueer or non-binary or transgender. I think we have a long way to go in the conservative movement to be welcoming to those who are not cisgender. Oh, yes, thank you. So what drew me to the conservative movement was when I was graduating from cantorial school, I really felt spiritually at home in conservative congregations. I really appreciated the ritual, still do, appreciate the ritual and all of the things that the conservative movement was bringing in terms of other areas of inclusion, but also just this great joy of infusing traditional music with contemporary music and a more full liturgy. I loved my liturgy class in cantorial school, and so I'm very passionate about the liturgy and chanting and all of that, and so that's why I'm here. That's why I do what I do, and I think conservative Judaism drew me in that way, and it's really I think, welcoming to a lot of people of all different backgrounds. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Happy to talk more after, yeah. Yes,
So-
thanks.
Hi, I just left an event to come here, so I wanted to pop in because I didn't want to miss this. And I want to make sure that we had a chance to say Mazel Tov on your engagement with your fiance. We're so excited for you guys. And I want to say I'm excited for us as a community. I mean, when we hired you, we didn't know. I mean, we know we have a female cantor and rabbi, and okay, that's kind of edgy, but okay. This is from the history and how our synagogue began and how Rabbi Frankel, it's the values that infuse us today through Rabbi Newman Kamen, of inclusion. At the same time, being strongly right in the conservative movement, pro-Israel. Some people know I do a little bit on the political side, and so I get a lot of different. Everyone wants to withdraw to their own little bubbles. I mean, I have actually a Pride event that I'm planning tomorrow, a picnic, and I texted about 1,000 people to come. You're going to that too? We can talk about it afterwards. But someone wrote back and said, and it's just absolutely threw me, I'm not coming because Pride is against Israel. And it just completely threw me because, first of all, there is no pride. There's not like a one organization that decides things, right? It's a culture, it's a movement, it's an expression. And yes, you'll see people of all different opinions and all different points of view. The point is, when we withdraw into our own, and I talked to her, I called her and said, I don't want to take away from too much, but this is why I wanted to be here. I'm so happy to be here. I said, if we just, she was afraid to be in a space where someone might be anti-Israel. She was afraid to even be near somebody that might express that opinion. And when we withdraw into our own circles, we lose the chance to learn from each other and to grow. And so being able to ask everybody, from a wide spectrum to come in and be included is so important in so many ways. And I'm really happy for you, I'm happy for us. That's why I'm wearing shorts, though I have to duck back out again. But Shabbat Shalom.
I'm happy to talk about anything that Dan mentioned at Kiddush. I'll leave it for not on the pulpit, but I'm happy to discuss some of what Daniel said.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed your talk and I learned a lot. So I have a practical question. Will we be making changes in our prayer book to accommodate the correct terminology, like pasting in little words?
Thank you. So that is something that I think maybe over time will introduce a few opportunities and options for folks. I know something that will be coming up in 2025. So we have 2 B'nai Mitzvah that are non-binary. So you might not even notice, it's not something we'll probably draw attention to, but they may use modet ani instead of modet or moda ani. They might use a different formulation of words. So again, there's lots written about this, way that we call folks up to the bima. So instead of saying ben or bat, son or daughter, we would say mi beit, which is from the house of. So from the home or from the house of, and there's also a non-gendered way of calling folks up, which we can transition at any time. Na la amod, which means, please rise, like please rise, and we call up. So of course, those are all great things that we can do at some point, not to change our customs, our minchagim here. I think for people who know and desire those changes, we can have conversations about them, of course, in conversation with Rabbi Newman Kamen. So the two of us will talk more about that. Nothing is changing right now, as far as I know, but we do want to make sure that people feel included and welcome and seen. It's really important to me that our students especially feel that this is a comfortable and safe space for them and that they are seen as who they are. And of course, all of you in this room, adults too. So feel free to come on up to me, and I'm happy to talk. If you want us to call you up in a different way to the Torah, we can talk about that. Of course, again, in partnership with Rabbi Newman Kamen. Yes.
This is very interesting news. And now I'm curious about your installation. How is it going to impact that?
Oh, so I think my installation should be just like a celebratory event. It'll be a lovely morning of music and davening for our Sunday morning minyan. I don't expect it to be really different. I don't, I think LGBTQ plus inclusion is very important to me. I am a cisgender woman. I use she, her pronouns. So I will not change a liturgy. That's not something that I'll do because I'm comfortable using the feminine language. But at the same time, there might be moments where I change the gender when I translate English. So for those of you who have been here on Friday evening, I was just telling Jen this last night, that sometimes I'll introduce Lecha Dodi, and when I welcome everyone to rise and face the entryway, I say we welcome our Shabbat royalty as opposed to our Shabbat queen. So I really do try to be subtle. I don't want to impose. I know that sometimes pride things, as Daniel had mentioned, can be political, and I really don't. I'm not a political person, generally speaking, but I know that sometimes these things are charged, and I want to make sure to be conscious of that. I want this not just to be a safe space for queer individuals, but for everyone. I want everyone to feel comfortable and safe in this space. Our building is set up in a way where we have gendered bathrooms, but we do have non-gendered bathroom in the school wing on the main floor. So there are options for folks if that's a need. So it's nice that we're making an effort, and I think that says a lot. Yeah. So not too much change for my installation, to answer your question. I went a little bit off on a tangent, but great questions. Yeah.
What day is the installation?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Aaron. Sunday, July 14th. Yes, Sunday, July 14th.
Take heart that it is growing, it is spreading. I'm visiting from Beth Tzedek in Toronto, and I wish everybody could have seen the pride and the joy when my niece went up and became the first trans person to read at the Bima and read the Torah. And I was at the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs convention in Philly last year, and inclusion with LGBTQ plus being a heavy emphasis was a major thematic. And so it is becoming present. And I think I was in business school once, and I had the best quote from my communications prof. She said, 90% of communications is raising awareness. This is what you're doing here. This is what everybody is doing. If you raise awareness, then we can all ask questions. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome. So glad to have you. All right. Yeah, I think it's time to read Torah. Yeah, let's do it. Our Torah portion, I believe, begins a little bit earlier. Aaron will announce it for us.